And welcome to Weather and Ag in Focus on this finally Friday, July 10th, 2026. Temperatures outside generally in the low 80s across the area. I'm Chief Meteorologist Dean Wysocki, along with our Ag Director Bridgette Readel. And Bridgette, not a bad afternoon out there, but we've got some dangerous heat on the way here, not only for the upcoming weekend, but even into next week, it looks like now.
I can hear soybeans starting to scream from here. Help me, I need some shade.
Yeah, it is going to be a hot one. And we're looking at sunny skies, zero chance of rain as this heat ridge builds in. And it's only going to continue to get hotter here as we head into the upcoming weekend. So here's how it pans out. For today, it's not going to be a bad one out there. Yeah, it's hot, but the humidity levels aren't too bad yet. We should reach in the upper 80s today with sunny skies, a few clouds into Lakes Country, but mainly sunny, and south winds at about 5 to 15. Down into the mid-60s tonight, and here comes the heat tomorrow. The National Weather Service has just issued a heat advisory for our area for Saturday. We'll have highs in the mid-90s with heat index values about 100 with south winds at 10 to 20. And excessive or extreme heat watch is in effect for Sunday and Monday. That will more than likely be upgraded to some type of warning, as we're expected highs on Sunday and Monday right around 100. But the humidity levels are going to be up there where we're going to be seeing heat index readings about 105 to 110 for Sunday and Monday. At least there's going to be a little breeze over the weekend out of the south at about 10 to 20. And then as we head into next week, I don't see a lot of relief. Again, right around 100 on Monday and the upper 80s Tuesday. And it looks like we're in the mid 90s all the way through next week. I don't see a chance of relief with rain and cooler weather until possibly the following weekend. So, once these heat ridges build in, they're hard to break down. And I know yesterday's models were trying to break the heat ridge down towards Thursday of next week, but our latest models are keeping this heat ridge kind of locked in, which makes a little sense. It's a pretty strong heat ridge, and those are hard to bust through. So I don't think it'll be till next weekend, not this one, but the following, till we start to see some relief around the area. So take it slow, stay hydrated if you're out and about. You know, I had a friend message me on Facebook. She's down in Nebraska, and she said, just curious, how high is the corn up there? I said, yeah, it's, I don't know, 3-4 feet maybe. I said, some spots a little higher, depends where you're at. I said, why? Why do you ask? She said, because it's about 7 feet down here. She said, and I'm telling people to watch out on those rural intersections that don't have stop signs because you can't see. So I said, well, that's good advice. It's not quite that high up here.
Quickly the case here.
Yeah.
Oh, we're quickly there.
You think
through this weekend, especially areas that
they'll
have
poke
good
up that
rainfall.
quick?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah, we'll have tasseling very soon. Certainly within 2 weeks at the latest. We've got corn on the move pretty fast. Remember, Nebraska, they can plant so much further ahead of us.
Oh yeah,
those guys were
easily
probably planting corn 6 weeks in advance, and they have longer day hybrids that plan to stretch out. Now, also, it's the difference between field corn and silage corn. You may have had fields that were silage corn, and they, of course, will be much taller, much faster as well, so that they hit their maturity, if you will, in time for silage season.
Gotcha. And this long stretch of dry weather, I mean, we were talking about this a little bit yesterday with, 7 to 10 days of no rain. Again, damage. Are we looking at damage? I know, speaking of damage, I'm sure you saw out in the central part of the state, north of Jamestown, and on around the Bismarck area, quite a bit of hail damage out there, unfortunately.
I would say the insurance adjusters do not have a lot of downtime right now in the hail business. They've been very busy. There was a lightning strike by Hamburg, and I believe it was also Hamburg, where a lightning struck one of their rural churches and just literally smoked the steeple on it.
Saw
that church may be a total loss. When it comes to how is our crop going to fare, it depends where you are. Have you had moisture? Because if you've had moisture, that's awesome. That means that you probably have enough to keep things going throughout this dry stretch. For those of us in northern Cass County who got spit on last night, but essentially didn't make anything happen for rainfall of sustenance, we really are worried about that crop. If you can irrigate, there'll be irrigators that go. But for the most part, people are not excited to see this dry stretch because our crop needs a drink. I can essentially plan to see very shriveled soybeans by the time we get through this. And corn's not feeling real good about it either. There are other areas of the state, like you get down around McLeod, where their soil is essentially a kid sandbox. Moisture just runs right through that profile. They will struggle through the heat segment as well because they will not be able to retain enough moisture for things to go well.
Hmm. Well, and like I said, I wish we had better news. I do see after this heat wave breaks, we should be in that what we call a northwest flow pattern for a little while, which should bring us 2-3 rounds of rainfall. Hopefully, it's enough to play catch up from what we're going to experience over the next 7 to 10 days.
We'll see what it does for
Yeah.
bugs. I mean, in some ways, this may dry us out to prevent a few diseases from happening in some areas. But generally, when you start to get a little bit drier weather, you tend to see bugs. So will we see soybean aphids emerging? Potentially. I think it might be too soon to tell, but certain areas could easily have soybean aphids pop up and need to look for insecticide treatments as we get into the last half of July and into August.
Right. Well, climatologically, this is the hottest time of the year. It's nothing we haven't seen
Sure.
before. It's we see it every year, but it's been a while since we've seen something of this length. I mean, our longest stretch of hot weather this year was end of May, where we had 5 90-degree days, and now we're looking at least a week, if not more, of 90-plus weather.
Absolutely. We're gonna sit on that hot weather for some time right now, and we hope that it all gets back into a reasonable pattern sooner rather than later.
Yeah, just give it a little time.
Now, for those who want to share your crop status, we'd love to have it. You can reach us on the JLA Insurance phone line, 701-293-9000. And you can send an email, ag@flagfamily.com or weather@flagfamily.com, because we'd be awfully curious to hear what's happening in your neck of the woods. If you want to share photos as well of your crop, good and otherwise, be happy to see those. We can see them via email, as I mentioned, or we can share them on our Lighthouse Commodities live stream, Facebook, YouTube, and Acres TV. If you send photos of your crop, we can remove the names to protect the innocent. Nobody has to say, boy, this is looking really good or it's looking really bad, because nobody needs the opportunity for hail to come and find you. And we're definitely in that season where the white combine comes in very quickly. And next week, we continue with Project Safe Send. You can get rid of unusable pesticides. Monday, you'll be able to do that in Williston. Tuesday, in Rugby. Wednesday, Devils Lake. Thursday, Larimore. That'll be the last day on July 16th. These run all morning from 8 a.m. till noon. They will be at the North Dakota Department of Transportation sites. And you can, in fact, rid yourself of partial containers and older materials that are banned, no longer have labels, they're unused, whatever the case might be. If you have large quantities, please contact the Department of Ag first to make sure that you can get rid of those items. And hey, while you're out there taking some of those pictures of your crop, consider submitting your photos to the 5th Annual Hometown Roots Photo Contest from Lalamond. Lalamond Plant Care wants to announce this program. The deadline is next week, Monday. I've shared it a time or two. I know I put it on our Facebook page for Weather and Ag in Focus. If you want to share a photo or a 30-second video celebrating agriculture for the opportunity to win $5,000 that could be used in your hometown, whether it is for your fire department, city parks, 4-H, and FFA programs, this is a chance to do so. So if you've got any questions, I will connect you with their area representative, Andy Steinberger. But I do think it is worth your time just to send the photo, because you never know when $5,000 might land in your neighborhood. After an update from the American Ag Network for the livestock market, we want to catch up on a few headlines, because there's plenty on this steamy, hot Friday before the weekend. And we'll do that when we return. Are you planning a new steel, commercial, industrial, ag building? Maybe so. Maybe this weekend you're going to spend a little time drafting the plans and preparing. Well, if that's the case, you're going to want to talk to Anderco Enterprises in Fargo. Anderco has 20 years of experience putting up buildings that are built to last. And they have a reputation that's built on experience, reliability, and results that truly stand the test of time. So give Anderco Enterprises a quick call. They would be happy to help you out in your situation. And especially with the hail that we've had, the storms that we've had, if you've lost cabins, buildings, storage, etc., that would be yet another reason to get a hold of Anderco. They're at andercoenterprises.com or 701-277-7078. So headlines. Let's talk just a few things that might be going on. Farm Journal, our friends over there, and a big thank you to Margie Eckelkamp as well as Time Daily who do this particular project. They send out a Ag Economist monthly monitor to survey what ag economists might be thinking in the farm sector. Now, I'm going to share this today in anticipation that we will have Lynn Paulson of Bell Bank joining us on Monday's show, because I think we'll maybe review some of this with Lynn and get his feelings on it locally. But as these ag economists across the U.S. reported, here's some of their financial outlook as we're going into the second half of 2026. They believe that higher interest rates truly remain a concern, while economists are expecting reduced capital investment and greater financial stress for those highly leveraged producers. I had a conversation this morning with a commodities broker, and he said, yep, I had a guy tell me he is worth $16 million on paper. But he doesn't take into account the liabilities on the other side of that balance sheet. Well, we can't be thinking in those types of numbers, folks, and that's going to be a great opportunity for us to talk about that with Lynn on Monday, how we have to look at the realistic picture of what's happening. The concern amongst ag economists extends to input costs, exports, land values, and land values. Well, that'll be a great discussion when we have Max Steffes join us next Tuesday for On the Auction Block with Steffes Group and talk about what's going on in land values, because month to month things do change. And water availability. That was a bit of a new topic that the ag economists brought up. Now, again, these are folks that are covering across the United States, and their reason for mentioning the water availability certainly happens in those areas where they're concerned about aquifers or irrigation systems out of places like the Colorado River down into Texas. And so that's maybe something new that's popped up. Now, also, the majority of ag economists right now are skeptical that year-round E15 legislation will pass in this current calendar year. 60% think that it's unlikely or highly likely. Well, we'll see how that flushes out, you might say, through the rest of the calendar year. When asking producers how they feel about today's crop prices, input costs, etc., and if they persist at the rate they're at, what if producers think about their farms? Well, producers, about 43% of them say that their farm's financial condition is good. That's a pretty easy term. We don't have any good metrics based off of that. But meanwhile, the ag economists think that 40%, or 40% of the economists, by the way, think that farms are going to require significant restructuring in order to remain viable coming along very soon. They believe that just 33% of producers can largely maintain their current operational structures under existing conditions. We'll see where all that leads. Now, with another interest rate hike expected before the year end, and more than half of respondents identified reduced capital investments as one of their most significant consequences for agriculture. So an equal percentage warned that higher debt servicing costs would create a breaking point for young, beginning, and highly leveraged operators. Was at an event yesterday out in Bismarck that was with the Association for North Dakota Agribusinesses, and had a really great conversation with agribusiness folks as well as farmers who were in attendance. And one of the things we talked about, so often we hear people say, we have to do some transition planning. Who's going to be the next person coming in to take that operation? There's quite a number of farms out there, when you start to think about it, who don't necessarily have an heir. They aren't sure who they're going to transition to. Now, is this an opportunity for an older generation farmer to make a great deal for a younger farmer to get them established? It could be, but it's hard to give up everything that you've worked for as well. So I see both sides of this coin. It's not going to be an easy transition, but it certainly is one that needs to be talked about. There's a lot of farms out there that don't necessarily have an heir up and coming. Now, nominations are being held for farmers and ranchers that may want to serve on their local USDA Farm Service Agency County Committee. FSA does indeed have a county committee in all areas, and these committees do help to make very important decisions when it comes to federal farm programs, how they're administered locally, and so much more. Nominations for the 2026 election must be at the FSA office by August 30th, postmarked or received again by August 3rd, not 30th, August 3rd. So that is actually coming up in just a couple of weeks. Those local voices truly matter. The ag producers who are actively farming play an important role in shaping how the federal farm programs affect their communities and their neighbors. And the nominations are currently open. And those elections for committee members will occur within the local administrative areas, the LAAs. So if you have an interest in that, stop by and visit with your local FSA office. You can also go to the FSA website in order to look at it a little bit more closely and share more details. Then let's talk just a little bit about some uh, smaller items, if you will. I always like to have a list of headlines that we can share, and we did that with some of the things yesterday. Now, farmers in some parts of the country will continue seeing fewer employees at their local USDA offices as the department really is working to rebuild their workforce that was quite depleted after last year's deferred resignation program and has been constrained by very tight budgets. Senior officials at USDA have acknowledged that staffing shortages at local FSA offices and NRCS offices are likely to persist even as the department hopes to hire as many as 9,500 employees. Richard Fordyce, who's the Undersecretary for Farm Production and Conservation, offered explanations. He's outlined next steps and realizes that this is more of a long-term problem. And he brought that up before the House Ag Committee meeting recently. The rationale for not rebuilding the workforces is a lot of times down to funding, and they're hopeful that through the appropriations process, they'll be able to see normal appropriations brought back into those agencies. The other thing that does happen, often in smaller rural communities, you can fill your FSA positions. But the FSA, the federal government as a whole, is a medium salary range employer. And so oftentimes you have folks who can find better options in the larger communities, such as Bismarck, Mandan, Fargo. And so it's hard to fill in those larger areas than it might be in some of our smaller counties where you have folks that are more available looking for jobs. Let's face it, we live in a state with a very low unemployment rate because if you want a job, you probably have it, maybe even two or three. After the after the bottom of the hour news, we have an opportunity to do the drainage difference, and that will be with Landmark Companies. I'll be joined by Blake Sunday. I've got a number of questions for him, especially about a conference he most recently attended. We'll hear his feedback on that next. By Monday, it's going to be hot. Maybe you're going to be in the farm office or at your agribusiness and you're scrolling through all of your old emails and so forth, and you find some that look a little shifty. Maybe just to protect yourself, one, delete them. Don't click on any links. And then two, get yourself on over to Tech Support Farm. Make sure to do the fence check assessment and be sure that you are keeping yourself, your networks, your apps, your equipment, everything safe from those who might want to do otherwise to you. So check them out. TechSupport.farm, the fence check assessment. Our sponsor of the Flag a Farmer program is the Landmark Companies, represented by Blake Sunday. Blake, I have a feeling on a day like today, you might be out in the field doing some installations.
Yeah, that is correct, Bridgette. We are out currently tiling as we speak. I know you've been talking about a lot of places that are dry, but currently where we're tiling, we've gotten 2 inches in the last 2 days, which is pretty typical for wherever we show up, it seems to rain.
If that's the case, I would like to see you in my driveway in an hour, please.
Yeah, I hear you.
So, Blake, I saw a video you did the other day where it was just pouring rain while you guys were trying to do a tile installation. How much does that interfere with what you're doing? I realize you're in some wet areas. Can you kind of slug through mud, so to speak, when you're doing those installations? Does the tile still set well after you do that? What are the effects?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the biggest concern is the customer's field, first and foremost. And as long as we're not tearing that up too bad, leaving too big of ruts, given whatever the situation may be, like you said, if we're in the bottom of a slough, it's a lot different than going through crop. But yeah, as far as our equipment, I mean, it's made for it, right? That's why we're there. That's what we're doing. Our dozers are set up with winches on them for a reason. So if we don't have enough traction to drive and pull it through, we'll literally winch it through. So it didn't slow us down. Other than that night, we had to shut her down. That was an inch and a quarter. We got that night there in a real short time, and then last night we got another 8/10 out there. So our equipment's made for it, I guess, is the moral of the story. But it doesn't always make it the most pleasant, if that makes sense.
When you have been out in the field, like you said, the rain tends to show up when you arrive. What are you seeing for soil conditions in a variety of places? Do you feel like we've tapped out our subsoil moisture, or any insight into what you've seen as you cover a fairly wide geography?
Yeah, there's still a lot of water moving underground. It might not appear that way at the surface or even a couple feet down, but obviously it depends on where you're at. But there's definitely still plenty of subsurface moisture throughout the regions that we're tiling, and that's for sure.
And your footprint is pretty extensive, because if folks are listening and think, I don't know, that maybe they aren't going to come quite this far east or west, what does that footprint look like for the landmark companies? Because you really are a leader in drainage.
Yeah, I mean, right now we're currently running crews in on the North Dakota South Dakota border and in Ohio. So we cover basically the upper Midwest, east to west, and as far south as we need. I mean, we've done, it wasn't a tile project, but we did a cable plowing project with our tile plows on the Rio Grande River. So that's as far south as you're going to get before you go to Mexico.
I would say you have a few miles on. And, last week I had the opportunity to visit with Heidi Vermeer Quist of the Vermeer Company out of Pella, Iowa. And you messaged me and said they build our tile plows. So is that a one-off? Like they build them specifically for you, or is that a part of their product lineup?
No, so you maybe misunderstood what I said, Bridgette, but Vermeer sells a plow, a utility plow that is made by the same company that makes our tile plows. And Vermeer
Oh, I see.
Vermeer never made any utility plows as big as the ones I'm talking. So they basically
Mm-hmm.
partnered with RWF Braun, which is the brand of plows we run out of Ontario, Canada. And Braun makes their large utility plows now that Vermeer is selling through their dealer network.
That makes it a much better explanation. See, that's why I ask the experts what they're doing rather than I have to just try to sort it out. So I appreciate that very much, Blake.
Yeah, no problem. But yeah, we do run a lot of Vermeer equipment on our utility side of our company. We run their vac trucks and their directional drills. They're an excellent company, and they stand behind their product, and they have a really good dealer support network throughout the country. So happy to work with them people.
Recently, with the rain we've had, there certainly have, especially like you get up to that Devil's Lake Basin, right? Or even out towards Wimbledon, north of Jamestown Valley City. Those folks have gotten a lot of rain. There's water on the move in a number of places, and which, when water moves that quickly, that fast, we hear about erosion. I had a listener reach out and say, but doesn't tiling just add to the erosion? I think it's the opposite, Blake.
That is correct. So typically your tiled field is going to absorb a significant amount more moisture than a non-tiled field in a wet period. So basically what you're saying and what we're saying is that when it rains 2 inches, that tiled field might be able to soak up an inch and a half of that, where the other field that wasn't tiled was already saturated, and 100% of that moisture ran off into the ditch and took nutrients and topsoil and whatever else it took with it, trash.
And there's been plenty of field trash that had to move when you think about some of the corn stalks. And unfortunately, there were even some hay bales that took off downstream considering some of the movement of that water. And
Yeah,
when you
it's
have to
amazing
go,
what the water will move.
oh, it's huge. Speaking of movement, you had an opportunity to attend a conference, so you moved out of state for that conference for just a few days. It was the cleanpower.org event. Tell me more about that, if you would.
Yeah, so that's a conference that happens annually. There's a main one, which is the one I was at, and then they have like regional ones that happen throughout the year. But it happens annually, the main event, main conference, and it really is catering to the renewable energy sector across the United States, and um, basically coming up with game plans on how to meet the energy demands across the country, whether it be with wind farms, solar farms, or whatever it might be. But those are the two main focus points of the Clean Power Conference. And so a lot of the contractors and companies that are owners, developers, all of the above that are building these projects and developing them are at that conference. Basically networking with contractors that are going to help them do obviously some phase of their project for them to get it across the finish line and get power to the grid.
My guess is it's not just that, but you're hearing updates as far as legislatively, policy wise, where projects are happening was certainly something that you mentioned. And were there any updates that you heard from folks that maybe took you aback for just a moment and you went, oh, I'm surprised at that?
You know, not really. I mean, like I think I mentioned it before. Like probably the biggest surprise that I had heard was one of the comments about across the country. There's places where a developer wants to put up, a couple big apartment buildings, and he goes to get the permits, and they basically tell him no because we don't have the energy to supply your new buildings. Therefore, you can't build them. I didn't realize that existed across the country. As far as legislatively, that stuff is moving all the time. So it's a work in progress, I guess, is the best way to answer that question. And what direction they're going to go. When the ink hits the paper, that's basically when we find out what the final details are.
Like Landmark Company is definitely proven results, precision drainage, leaders in what I always think about drain tile right off the bat when I hear your name as Landmark Companies. But it's not the only thing that you do. And if you could give folks a reminder of some of the other services that you have, I think that's important as they're doing some planning of projects later this summer and into the fall.
Yeah. So yeah, like you said, we specialize in agricultural drain tile from start to finish. We'll design the project. We'll service your current projects, do warranty work, repair work, installation, the full gamut as far as that goes. Our utility division does a lot of directional drilling. So if you need a water line put from one end of your property to the other, and there's a bunch of stuff that you don't want to disturb, we can do that. We can do graded bores. We do a lot of graded bores for tiling. We got 5 or 6 of them to do in Ohio, where we have to bore under highways with the outlet. So that pipe has to be graded in order for it to flow the water that we need. We do cable plowing and trenching. We got the construction roll-offs as well. So yeah, whatever you guys might need out of those services, don't hesitate to give us a call. We'd love to give you a competitive price and see if we can do business.
Folks can find you at landmarkcompanies.com. If they are curious, Blake, if folks are wondering, they can reach you by phone, which you're not, and also if they just say, I'll pick this all up later because I can't remember, folks can always email me, ag@flagfamily.com, and I will make sure to connect you with Blake. I'll get his information to you, etc., because you never want to leave a question unanswered, I'm sure.
That's correct. Yep. We're here to help.
Blake Sunday with Landmark Companies is here for the Drainage Difference. We appreciate all of their time and so many questions that Blake is able to answer for us every time we visit. So for other questions, let him or I know, and I'll make sure to connect you right away with Blake. We'll be back, probably a little touch of the weather as well as some headlines. All right. We have some national headlines we want to make sure to cover. First of all, extreme heat in France has killed hundreds of thousands of poultry. Overwhelming carcass collection service and prompting authorities to consider on-farm burial in the two biggest poultry producing regions. Okay, that could happen anywhere. Keep an eye on those backyard flocks. Pump the water, folks. Nobody wants to have to see this. The head of the French poultry industry group has estimated at least several 100,000 poultry have died on both indoor and outdoor farms as of late, but it's too early to give a precise figure. Together, the regions of France that account for nearly 60% of the poultry flock have just seen massive deaths. France is the European Union's third largest poultry producer, behind, anybody want to guess? Anybody want to guess? Who else might be raising a lot of chickens in European Union? Poland and Spain, those two countries. Meanwhile, over in Russia, farmers are preparing to harvest their winter wheat, but they are facing soaring diesel costs and terrible weather. That gives them a lot of concerns about the final size of the crop as well as profit margins. And this is the world's top shipper of grain. Ukraine has stepped up its attacks on Russian energy infrastructure and leading to fuel supply shortages across a lot of the country. That's resulted in many farms going into the harvest season, which has started this month, without enough diesel for their combines and trucks. Small to medium-sized farms, which produce the bulk of the country's grain, are facing the largest fuel shortages. Forecasts of rain also in the southern region at the end of June and into early August really slowed down harvesting, and that was all according to the Crop Consultancy, IKAR. North Dakota Beef Commission brought social media influencers together in Carrington for its Girls Who Grill event, and that was highlighting how beef checkoff dollars are being used to connect with consumers. North Dakota Beef Commission's executive director is Nicole Werdner, and she said those efforts are designed to reach audience producers may not see directly. There's a lot of producers that don't necessarily see the checkoff at work when they are targeting different sorts of people. The lower amount of checkoff that we have invested right now means we have got to make every dollar beneficial when it comes to using the checkoff here in the state, according to Wardner. And many times today's consumers, they don't trust brands, but they actually put more trust in the influencers along with the brands. So if you're an influencer touting something in particular, you may have more trust built into you. So Beef Commission wants to connect the influencers and have those followers follow along and reach more consumers who are at home. Beef demand is strong. We want to continue to see that because the overall cattle market may eventually see that downturn in its cycle. And we don't want people to lose sight of how wonderful beef is as a protein and what more we can do to keep it on people's plates as well as filling the store shelves. Now, is modern wheat really all that different from what it used to be? Frequently, I hear people tell me that I can't eat breads here in the United States the same way that I can eat in other countries. Okay, let me give you just a little thought here, folks. We don't eat the same way. Here in the United States, especially those of us who were kids in the 70s, 80s, and so much more, we loved the processed foods. I mean, call me a Pop-Tart, but it didn't seem like a bad idea at the time, washed down with some high C. Or Hawaiian Punch. Now we're trying to clean up our health act, but we still love Wonder Bread. And in the milling process here in the United States, we mill out so much of the good in order to have that pretty white bread. We always eat with our eyes first. And so what we've done is changed our milling processes because we want it faster and we want it pretty. That's not always the case in other countries where they're like, hey, I made the bread by hand. Take it or leave it. So is it our modern wheat? No, it's really not the wheat. It's how we're milling it because we as a consumer are asking for it. Is wheat genetically modified? Does all wheat get sprayed with glyphosate? The answer to that is no. These are a few of the questions that have been tackled in a recent podcast episode called hold on, I got to find the name of it, Discover Ag Podcast. And so this conversation begins by addressing some of the most popular, common misconceptions that happen around the wheat production industry. And they have an excellent guest speaker, Derek Dykstra. He's a fourth-generation farmer. He is the founder of KED Farms, CEAD, and he's the grower behind the Sunrise Flour Mill. And Derek explained the differences between genetically modified crops, conventional breeding, and why there is so much confusion by people when it comes to wheat production. Throughout the discussion, he encourages listeners to look beyond social media and understand the sciences and farming practices behind one of the world's most staple crops. Again, that is the Discover Ag podcast. It is hosted by a couple of ladies that I have met through social media. They are great. They do a wonderful job of working with Derek to explore the history of wheat, how our modern varieties have come to be, and they talk about what sets heritage wheat apart, and while these older varieties are getting a renewed interest on them amongst consumers as of late, and also the challenges of growing and producing heritage grains, because they're not the same as our modern grains, and they do take more time and intent in order to raise them. If you're curious about the milling cycle and what I'm talking about when I say that we mill out the good stuff, I need you to go listen to the Agronomist Happy Hour podcast, where the guest was Freed, Godfrey Freed. Took me a minute to get his name. Godfrey Freed was the guest. And Godfrey, who has worked in mills and elevators, running them for like 30 years, did a fantastic job of saying, you as a consumer asked for this, and here's what we're doing. So if we want that change to happen, as a consumer, we have to change what we do as well. And that's why we're seeing such a resurgence in ancient grains, handmade breads, the sourdough stands that every town has. And there's reasons for it. So if you're a farmer, a baker, or you just love carbs, these are two podcasts you're going to want. Again, that was Discover Ag's discussion with Derek Dykstra, and then also the Agronomist Happy Hour podcast with Godfrey Freed. He NDSU grad, by the way, so that's a fun conversation for someone who grew up in Southwest North Dakota in a job he never thought he'd do. The USDA has confirmed a 132,000 metric ton new crop soybean sale to China. Old crop export sales just hit a 10-week high. And this is also fueling chatter that Beijing is trimming its tariffs on U.S. grains. We did see some of that. But after months of China shopping everywhere but here, this may be something that helps us feel a little bit more on track for what could be happening in soybean purchases, particularly as we start to get closer to the end of our growing season and harvest. 3 major egg producers have struck an agreement with the Department of Justice and 17 states on allegations the companies manipulated egg prices. New York State Attorney General's office said that the 4 companies in question will supply a total of 53 million eggs to food banks and nonprofit organizations. The suppliers will also make a $3.3 million payment to those 17 states that were affected. All right, those are some news and headlines from around the world, around the country. Stay cool. It's going to be tough this weekend, but lay in front of that air conditioner and lap it up whenever you can. Have a great rest of your day. Jay Thomas is coming up next.